What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be sharing all about whether or not we are following Dave Ramsey while we are working on paying off over $300,000 of student loan debt. Now if you're not familiar with Dave Ramsey, he is a big personal finance author, radio personality. He has a show called The Dave Ramsey Show that is also a podcast, and he also puts clips of it here on YouTube, and so he's all over the place. He's been around forever. I think he started getting into the personal finance space like back in the 80s, and he's developed a very specific method as to how to pay off debt, but also build wealth and be comfortable in retirement, give back, all of that. So in today's video, I'm gonna go through his baby steps and his specific advice he gives for people who are paying off debt. Now before I get into all the details of what he recommends and what we are doing, I want to start off by saying Dave Ramsey has helped thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people get out of debt and gain financial security, and that is amazing. It's something he deserves full credit for, and I really appreciate and respect him for that. And his advice has actually been life-changing for us as well, because when I started watching his radio show on YouTube, just like the short clips, I was focusing more on the ones about debt because that's the phase that we're in. I listened to probably hundreds of his videos before something clicked and I felt like, hey, this could be us. Like, we could get this debt under control, we could pay it off, and it's not seeming impossible anymore. And that is huge. I mean, a lot of stuff with personal finance is not just a math problem. And he says this, and a lot of people say this, it's an emotional issue. And if you could just write down the math and follow it and you were a robot, then a lot less people would have financial problems. But we're real humans with emotions and issues, and so we don't always do exactly what the, smartest financial thing to do is. We make decisions based on other real life factors. So I want to start off this video by saying I'm so eternally grateful for him and his advice and everything that he does. So with that said, let's get into all the specifics about what he recommends versus what we are doing. So if you're not familiar with the baby steps, these are Dave Ramsey's baby steps, and basically, it starts out with step one, which is a $1,000 emergency fund. And so when we first started following him, we originally had about $2,000 or $3,000 in savings, and we kept it at that. We didn't use the excess to pay down debt and just keep that $1,000 emergency fund. We just didn't feel comfortable that $1,000 was enough to cover any sort of big emergency. And so we had $2,000 to $3,000 in our savings at any given time for the first few months of our debt-free journey. Then coronavirus happened, and that changed a lot for us. We felt really uncomfortable only having $3,000 in savings because we just didn't know what was going to happen with our jobs. I mean, to an extent, we still don't know. For now, we have jobs, and it seems like they're pretty secure, but I think a lot of the economic effects for certain industries are going to be felt after coronavirus, like a couple years down the road. And so at any given time, things could change, and we just didn't feel comfortable only having $3,000. So we bumped up our emergency fund to $18,000, and we're working on getting it to $20,000. And that is about 3 months of living expenses for us, including all of our minimums on our debt payments. And so that's really not supposed to happen until you're completely out of debt, except for your house. But we skipped a step. We stashed a bunch of money in savings, and that's because there's a global pandemic and it's just not normal times. All right, so step two in the baby steps is to pay off all your debts except for your house, and that is the baby step that we are on. When you're doing this, he recommends several things. One is the debt snowball method, and the debt snowball method means you order your debts from smallest to largest, and regardless of interest rate, and you just pay the smallest one first and go down the line until you pay off your largest debt. And the reason he recommends this is because there is a psychological benefit to paying off a debt. You feel the progress more, and when you're successful with paying off a debt, it gives you confidence to keep going, and it keeps you motivated. And so then when you pay off your smallest debt, you take that payment that you were paying towards it and you add that into your next smallest debt payment until that one's paid off, and so eventually your debt payments just get bigger and bigger and bigger and snowball until you're paying a large amount towards your largest last debt, and then that one gets paid off, and that is the debt snowball method. So if you've watched any of my previous videos, you know we are basically following this method. So we started out with 7 different debts, and we paid off our 3 smallest, and then we skipped the 4th one and went right to the 5th one because that one had an interest rate of almost 12%, and the 4th one had an interest rate of 5%, and so we just felt like it wasn't worth paying that extra interest for that much longer. And so we skipped over debt number 4, went right to debt number 5. We have since paid off debt 5, and we are back to working on debt number 4, which will hopefully be paid off in about 6 weeks. And we'll be down to 2 debts, which are our 2 largest by far, which is my student loan and my husband's student loan. But it does feel good to have paid off all those little ones, and it just feels easier to make payments towards a smaller number of debts than have to make all these little payments to all these different places and keep track of it. So I'm really glad we did the debt snowball, even though we could have saved a little money on interest if we had paid our highest interest debt first versus just going smallest to largest. But either way, you know, even though Dave says smallest to largest, if you're paying off debt, that's a good thing. So whichever way you want to do it, I fully support you. But according to Dave, you're supposed to do it smallest to largest. And so we basically did that with one exception thus far. Now, one thing that Dave says is while you're paying off debt on baby step number 2, you should stop all contributions to retirement accounts. And this is something we are also not totally following. We were putting more towards retirement before we started really getting serious about our debt at the beginning of 2020. However, my husband is still contributing to his 401k up to his employer match because his employer will match a certain amount of money that he contributes, and so he contributes $250 a month towards retirement while we are still paying off our debts. Now let's say that we stopped that contribution, we took that money every month through his paycheck, which would be taxed, and we put it towards our debt. And let's say that it took us 5 years to get our $300,000 of debt paid down. That would be an additional after-tax, maybe $11,000 that we would have to put towards that amount. So the amount it would allow us to speed up our debt payoff versus the benefit of the employer match and compounding interest of that money being invested over time just didn't make sense to us. It's such a small amount compared to our total debt balance, and so we were willing to forego our debt-free date being delayed by maybe like 2 months in order to contribute something to retirement while we are paying off debt over the next, 3, 4, or 5 years. Alright, so the next thing that Dave Ramsey recommends is using a zero-based budget. And what this means is you have a written budget every single month and you write down all the money that's coming in, and then you allocate all that money to specific expenses, and at the bottom of your budget you add up the income, subtract the expenses, and you're supposed to get a 0 at the bottom, meaning that every dollar that comes in each month is accounted for. And we are definitely doing this. I highly recommend it. It's such a good method. It was something we were trying to do for a very long time, and for a long time when we had all the income minus the expenses at the end, we had a negative number. And that was part of the problem when we were trying to budget and pay off debt, is we were negative every single month, and so there was really no way to get ahead. And so it took a long time to even be able to get to 0 so we could not continue getting behind, and then from there get ahead by paying extra towards debt. And so I just wanted to mention that, we have made a ton of amazing progress this year on our debt payoff journey, and I started tracking it this carefully this year, but this was January 2020 when we started really attacking our debt. Was not the beginning of our debt-free journey, because we were working hard on getting to a place where we could afford our life and not be negative every single month for a long time by paying off one of our cars and trying to improve our budget and be better with our spending and all that. So there was a lot of work that went into our debt-free journey before I started tracking it in January. And so even though we've only been doing this for a year, it feels like we've been doing it for much longer than that, because we were working on getting to a place where we didn't have a negative number at the bottom of our budget every month for quite a while. But getting back to Dave's suggestion, the zero-based budget, tracking every single dollar that comes in is critical to maximizing your debt payoff. I 100% agree with this. Dave has a really good free app called the Every Dollar app, I think, if you just search Every Dollar, and it's a budgeting app, and it's also a website. You can do it on the computer too, and it's a way for you to track all of your income and expenses every month using his zero-based budget method. We do not use that app because we use a spreadsheet, and so we just like doing that better. It's a little simpler to me because we know how to use spreadsheets, but if you're not good in Excel or Google Sheets or whatever, and you just want to use something where you don't have to set it up yourself, I highly recommend that app. I've gone in there and like played around with it, and it is great to use. It's really user-friendly. If you're not good at budgeting, it's a great place to start. So 100% agree with this recommendation, and we will probably do this for the rest of our lives, or at least for many years to come until we're out of debt and have gotten a really good system going to automate all of our savings for retirement and our other financial goals after we have paid off our debts. All right, so the next thing Dave recommends is beans and rice, rice and beans. If you guys have watched any of his videos or listened to his radio show, then you know when he's telling people how to pay off their debts. He says you have to get gazelle intense and eat rice and beans, and you only see the inside of a restaurant if you're working there, and all these things to minimize your spending and increase your income. And we are doing that the best we can. Now, for us with $300,000 worth of debt, it's just a number that we're not going to be able to pay off in 1 or 2 years. And, you know, I know if we called into Dave's show and I said we have $300,000 of debt and $200,000 of income, he would say live off 50 and use 150 each year for 2 years to get that paid off in 2 years. And that might be possible for some people, and we potentially could do that if we really wanted to, but I know us, and it just would not be good for our mental health to go that gazelle intense. So we are very focused on our debt payoff, and we've made a ton of progress. If you've watched my videos, you know how much progress we've made. We've paid off about $52,000 in the course of 10 months, and we still have a couple months left in the year. And so for us, that is really great progress. We're so happy with that and so proud of it. We have cut back a lot in our expenses. We don't go out to eat, and if we ever get takeout, it's like McDonald's or Chipotle, and it's few and far between. We canceled our cable. We stopped doing all kinds of spending. We have allowances that we each get every week, and that amount has been greatly reduced. We give ourselves a little bit of room to do things that make us happy, because the way I think of it is if we restrict ourselves too much, it's like doing a crash diet, and you can like white knuckle a crash diet for only so long before then you just get too overwhelmed with it and you give up and you know, eat a bunch of food and gain back all the weight that you lost. And so I want us to focus more on adjusting our spending habits to create a new lifestyle for ourselves that's sustainable long term, versus trying to artificially force us to spend way less than we're used to and just put it all towards debt in a way that we get burned out and give up or backslide or anything like that. So we are planning to put aside a little bit of money for vacation over the next couple years. We do get spending money. We, you know, do buy healthy groceries that cost a lot. Our grocery budget is probably ridiculous to some people, but for us, it's worth it. I'd rather be in debt for a month or 2 or 3 longer and eat the groceries I want to eat over the next 5 years than to give that up and be out of debt a little bit sooner. So it's a choice we're making. We understand that. We understand that, you know, we could do this faster, but that's just not what works for our family. And like I said, it's a personal decision. Personal finance is personal. So I still feel like we are on the right track to be successful with paying off our debts, and it's just gonna be in a little bit longer timeline, and we are okay with that. So that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you are a Dave Ramsey fan and you're following his method, comment below and let me know if you are following him to a T, or if you are changing up his recommendations at all based on what works for you or your family. If you like the video, then make sure to smash that like button. It really helps out my channel. And if you want to see more videos like this, then hit the red subscribe button. I'd love to have you as a subscriber, and I will see you guys soon in my next video. Bye.